So I'm going to show you Arkade. This is your one-stop CLI for Kubernetes. Why is it called that? Well, it's got a couple of features I think you'll like. The first is that you can download CLIs like kubectl or even Kind very, very quickly. That's the first thing we're going to do, as everything with Kubernetes starts with kubectl and some sort of Kubernetes distribution. First of all, I want to update my Arkade version, and now I'm on 0.5.1. And we'll see if we look at the help message, we've got this get command. This is the one that we can actually use to download the CLIs. There's more than what's listed here, but those are the ones we've got, for example. Let's start with the kubectl then. This is now going to download from the internet. It's a relatively large binary, but I've got a good internet connection. Let's get that. It's been put in a temporary location. We've made it runnable and then we've installed it. And actually you don't necessarily need sudo if you have write permissions on. Use a local bin, or if you just want to put files in another path and then make them runnable. Now, if you're in kubectl version, we see we don't have a server at the moment, but the client is the version that we just downloaded from above. All good so far. The next thing we want to do is download Kind. Now, Kind is a local Kubernetes distribution. And you see, again, this is very, very quick. In a matter of moments, we've got both tools and they're both up to date. So I'm going to resize this window a bit so that we can see right to the edge. There we are. Now, the next thing you do with Kind is you create a cluster. In order to do that, you need to have Docker for Mac or Linux or Windows running and being in the Linux mode. Kind is a useful tool. It's similar to Rancher's, K3s or K3d, a tool to run K3s in Docker. It's a similar sort of speed. And up until recently, you would have to recreate it every time you restarted your machine. I believe it now has persistence, which means that you can get back to where you were, you can restart it and just keep everything in a local cluster like you would do with Minikube. So we're all set. We're now switching into that cluster configuration and we're ready to start looking at what else Arkade can do. Now, the main thing that you're going to want to do, other than the get command for these CLIs, is to use the install command. So let's see what kind of stuff we can do. We've just got those first tools and created a cluster. We could install OpenFAS, but I think everybody knows the Kubernetes dashboard and how hard that can actually be to get installed correctly. And there's actually no real parameters that we need here, no options as such. We just run the one command. Now that looked fast because it actually applied Kubernetes YAML files directly in the cluster, and rather than just creating an admin account or getting a password for you on a once off, it's actually printed out the information that you need to run to now give that dashboard access to your cluster. Well, the next thing you do is get your token, and the token is used to log into the dashboard. I'm going to put that on my clipboard. Command C, and then we need this proxy command. Okay. Once we're running that, we can open its URL. It's a bit zoomed in there, isn't it? We're gonna go for token mode, and we've got effectively the password or the token of our user account. Hitting sign in, and we can see everything looks good. Normally, the first thing that happens is you install the wrong version of the dashboard. The second thing is that RBAC permissions are all wrong. The third thing is you can never find your token. Well, we're less than 5 minutes into this video and we already have the dashboard and we're able to look at what is available there. Now, we could also install other dashboards like Portainer. This is a project that's just come over to Kubernetes from the Docker Swarm world, very popular. Neil told me they have over 1 million downloads already of the Kubernetes version. Cert Manager is something that I really like to use to get my TLS certificates from Let's Encrypt. And then we've got something like Nginx ingress. Now, if we look at this command, it actually has a couple of options. One of them is that we can run in host mode, and that will allow us to expose Nginx without actually having a load balancer available. That's useful if you're running at home or on premises. The other thing we can do is we can specify a namespace, and if we're installing a lot of apps, we can even optimize this and disable whether we're going to update our repos before installing it. Now, we also like the metric server. I'm not sure this one has any options, but we'll just install it. And what that does, it enables us to run commands to see what the usage is across nodes and across pods. Now, what else do we have here that might be interesting? Well, let's put Nginx in. And then we should be able to see these on our dashboard. Some of these actually create their own namespaces. We've got OpenVAS as well, and this short command arkade that, if you like your aliases, comes with it by default. So let's run that. Now, you might see that at the end of each of these commands, like with the dashboard, we're getting information printed out. And that is a helpful message, and you can get back to it at any time. These aren't from the Helm chart, these are actually from the app itself. So let's imagine that we lost the info, the password for the Kubernetes dashboard. We just do arkade info, app name, and we can get back to those useful commands that we wanted, and there's our token. But now that we've deployed a few things, we can actually see these in our dashboard. We've got Nginx ingress, the controller is in the default namespace. We can click onto this deployment. We'll be able to find its pod. As you know, deployments create replica sets that then go off and create pods. Here it is. That's the node it's running on. We just have the one. Kind can actually create more than one node, but we're not doing that right now. We've got all the events relating to it. We've got the command that was used. And I believe there's even somewhere here where we can get the logs. There we are. So there's Nginx ingress. Now, whilst we don't have a load balancer available because we haven't installed anything on a cluster and we're running locally, you can actually use the inlets operator to go off and get a load balancer even on your private computer and an IP. So let's see where that ingress controller is. There it is. What we can do is run port forward, put the deployment name. We know that this runs on port 80, but it will be, I don't know, let's say 8080 for the sake of not having to run this as root. Now we should be able to go to the local host on 8080, and we see that we've hit Nginx. We've got these errors because it doesn't have anything to serve us. We haven't really configured it. Theoretically, we may or may not see a log here. What the ingress controller tends to do is update when you've added new definitions rather than telling you what the logs are. We can also go through our namespaces and we can see the dashboard is deployed in its own namespace with its own deployments. We've got CPU and memory usage coming up now, and we can drop into that OpenVAS namespace and we can see the various components that it deploys. Now, if you want to know a bit more about OpenVAS, you can go to openvas.com. There's docs there, but also, as I said earlier, we can always just run arkade info, and that will tell you how to use the application. If you want specific help on an application, OpenVAS has a lot of options. You can just run install and --help. And if you want to know what apps are available, you can run arkade install --help. So we could add something here like Redis or we could add Linkerd, we can add Jenkins, Grafana, you name it, whatever you want. Just go ahead, arkade install, and what you see is checking whether we have Helm yet or not. This is where they're stored, the binaries that are downloaded for you. We see the settings that are being translated from our command line, and then we get our input, or rather our output for you, and then sometimes the Helm chart might have some of its own output to sort of help you along. Now let's see, we could go and open this, Grafana. There's our password. Let's port forward. And this is on port 3000, so localhost 3000. Now you can do this from a cloud Kubernetes cluster, or you can do it with Kind. It doesn't really matter, because the port forwarding actually encrypts the data, and it makes it really easy just to get hold of stuff without exposing it on the internet. So there's Grafana. So if you liked any of this and you're interested in trying it out, there are a few tutorials that you can find here, and a few from the community, list of apps, and then we do have some open issues and PRs where you can go ahead and sort of say, I'd really like this thing, or I want to make that happen, I'm going to raise the PR and work on it for you. The other thing you can grab is a really neat t-shirt. These are made in the OpenFAS store. You can buy an arkade t-shirt there. We've got hoodies and mugs for the other projects too. So I hope you like this. It works on Linux, Mac, and on Windows, and it also works on your Raspberry Pi. Now, not all of the apps will work on the Raspberry Pi. You've got things like Istio that just aren't supported, but fortunately, Arkade can detect that and it will tell you. So go and download it, give it a try, see what you think, and by all means, raise an issue, send a PR. It'd be great to have your input on this project.